welcome back to Spirit of Nature Art and episode 3 of this little altered book. And today we are going to be constructing the whole book and putting all of those elements together that we have been making over the last couple of weeks. So the first thing we are going to do is cover that piece of grey board that we cut as the spine. So I've just taken a couple of pages out of the original book that we took out of the cover, and I'm just sticking two pieces together so that the text is long enough to cover that whole spine. Just giving that a stick down and cutting around that, and also mitering each of the corners as well so that we can wrap that whole spine area so that the edges are all nice and neat and tidy as well. So just adding some glue on and just pulling that excess around onto the back so that we get that really nice finish along the edges of that spine. Just edging it with those distress inks. So I've been using vintage photo and ground espresso all through the project, so continuing to do that on each thing that I am using. And now I want to cover up all that kind of scrappy bit from where we gutted the book. So I'm taking another one of those pages and I'm just kind of tearing that down so I get a nice interesting edge. Just lining that up in place and giving it a little bit more adjustment, because I want the text to be on the edge. And again, I have used the distress inks to edge it, and I also just added a little bit of tea dye because it just felt almost like too new next to the inside cover there. So it's just kind of taken that kind of bright white away. And just gluing that in place across that central area and giving it a really good burnish, because I really want it to get into those kind of creases. I don't want any kind of baggy areas there. So just really getting into those creases, folding it again, just to create that place for that spine to sit nicely in the middle. And now that is all glued down, I can glue the actual spine in. So this is going to give us the structure to put the pages in. But before we start putting the flaps in, I want to put my closures in because I want the back side of this to be covered by the flaps we put in. So once those flaps are in, we can't add anything else. So I'm going to punch some holes with my crocodile. So I've just found the central point on each of those areas, and once I've kind of punched this hole here, I'm going to set that little kind of marker so that when I go back to the other side, it's in exactly the same kind of distance in from the edge, and just going in and squishing those eyelets in. So this is such a little book, it doesn't need a big closure, so I'm just using eyelets, and I'm going to use a tie. So I've got some Sari ribbon here that I've actually cut down the middle. And what I'm going to do is dye that with the same distress inks that I have been using, or I should say oxides, shouldn't I, that I have been using through the project. So that is just some vintage photo oxide pad that I've just put on that mat there, squirted some water on, and I'm just covering all of that ribbon so that we get this nice vintagey looked ribbon that I'm just tying through those eyelets. These all need to be in place before I start adding all the extra elements so I can glue them on top of and hide the back of those eyelets. So now that is all in place, I want to bring in the spine mechanism. So this little mechanism here is just going to hold these two central pages in. So we made this all the way back in episode 1, I think. And what I'm going to do now is along each edge of the each side of that mechanism is I'm going to put double-sided tape on. So on the back and the front. So you can see I've done the right-hand side, the left-hand side, and the same on the back. And I'm also going to put a piece of that double-sided tape in the very middle score on the back as well, because that's the one that is going to attach to that spine, like that. So you can see each of the flaps has got a bit of tape on, ready to take those pages. And then I'm just going to mark the center of that spine. I'm going to peel off that bit of backing tape from the double-sided tape there. I'm just going to add a little bit of Hi-Tack glue so that it gives me a bit of wiggle room before that double-sided tape really grips. So just giving that a good burnish to make sure that that has stuck. So you can see the central scored area has completely stuck to the spine, and now we've got these flaps. And before I attach those pocket pages, I just want to add a little bit of detailing. So I've got my stamp here, and again I'm coming in with Vintage Photo, and I'm just going to stamp that all the way up the middle, just to create an extra little bit of detailing. So much easier to do that before I've put the pages in. So here come the pages that we made in episode 1, and just deciding which way around I want them to go. And so again, I'm going to peel off the backing from the double-sided tape on the front and the back, and I'm adding that little bit of Hi-Tack glue to the front and the back as well, so we've got some wiggle room. And I'm just going to open that pocket and slide it over that flap only up to that first score line, so just where that double-sided tape is, not the bit that connects with that central bit, because that gives us space for the page to flap backwards and forwards like that. And the same with the other one. I'm going to peel off that double-sided tape on the front and the back, add the Hi-Tack glue to give us some wiggle room, and then I'm just going to open that pocket and slide it over up to the first score line, and just make sure that that is properly connected and in position. Now I will go back in and add some tea dye paper to some of those extra little bits of that spine that are showing. I'm not sure if I show that in the video though, but I do. So those two central pages are in now, and now it's time to add the flap with Arthur on, our funny little bird there. So because this edge here is going to go right up to where that ribbon is, again, I'm adding some double-sided tape and adding some Hi-Tack glue on it. And I have also put a little bit of glue on the top and the bottom, so we create that tuck spot. Again, just making sure that is really properly connected with that back page, especially where that eyelet and the Sari ribbon are coming out from. So there is Arthur, all nicely in position, nice and simple. And now we want to add this flap over on the other side. It's really very satisfying when you create in this way. You do all of the prep, everything's ready, and then as you're constructing the book, I think constructing this all together probably took maybe like an hour, hour and a half, something like that, because all of the preparation and all of the details have been done. So again, just on that little flap there, I'm adding some double-sided tape, and I'm going to put some tacky glue on, just making sure everything is nicely burnished down. Popping him in position. And I'll come back and add something there to cover up where that flap is now. So there we go, that side, nearly done. And then coming over to this side here, we're gonna add that front flap in exactly the same way, double-sided tape, Hi-Tack glue. And just making sure, particularly where the eyelet and the Sari ribbon is, that we are really kind of burnishing that area, making sure the connection between the two pages and the glue is really sound. You will see that there's that fussy cut flamingo there that never made it into the book. That might make it into another project. Quite often I fussy cut quite a few things out and then audition them, and not all of them make it into that particular project. we want to do this area here, because remember we created these little up and down flaps, and I want to use some of my tea dye paper, because we've used that already in this project, as a background. But again, I kind of want to mirror that kind of torn look that we've used elsewhere, and allow that text to kind of peekaboo out underneath it. So I'm just kind of adding that torn edge and just going to tear this piece here using my steel rule to size, so that should fit as a nice background on that page there. So again, just edging it with my distress inks. But I'm not going to stick it down just yet, because I want to use magnets to close these little up and down flaps. So first thing I'm going to do is get them ready, double-sided taped up, and then I'm going to flip them over, and I'm going to pop a magnet roughly in the middle at the bottom of each of those flaps, and I'm just taping them down. I think there's a bit of bookbinding tape, but you can use washi tape, whatever. And then I'm going to cover that over with some more tea dye paper. So the magnet is at the opposite end of the flap, so that when you flap it down, that magnet is at the bottom and is going to hold that flap closed. You'll see in a minute when we put them in position. So flap number 1, flap number 2, and I'm just going to take that double-sided tape off the top of flap number 1, put some tacky glue on and line that up. And then the same on the bottom flap, that's going to flap the other direction. Put that into place. Sometimes it's easier to turn your book around so that you can get things in the right position. So now we can add the next magnets that are going to sit on that inside back cover. So I've literally just dropped a magnet onto the area where the other magnet is underneath that tea dye paper, so it lands in the right spot. And now I'm just adding a small little bit of double-sided tape onto that magnet, peeling the backing off, which is quite fiddly, and then just closing it, so that that bit of double-sided tape helps it stick in exactly the right position on the cover underneath it. So they will always line up. So I'm just adding a little bit of tape onto the top just to make sure they stay in that right position. And now I can glue down my bit of tea dye paper over the top, knowing that the magnets on the flaps and the magnets on the backing are always going to line up. So giving that a right good burnish, especially around the areas where the magnets are. And here we go, this is where we're at. So our little book has got the front flap and these little flaps that magnetically close. And now we've got these 2 pocket pages, and then we have these little flaps in this extra tuck spot there. So the main construction of this little book now is complete. But of course we've got pocket pages, so we can put things in them. So I want to make a couple of journaling cards. I've cut some scrapbook paper, I think this might be Stamperia, to fit those pockets. And again, I've got a bit of tea dye paper with some lines on that I've just torn and edged with distress ink, and I'm just going to stick on the back of that paper so that we've got a really nice journaling spot. Give that a good burnish. And then I've got some more fussy cut elements here. I think last time I mentioned Tracy Fox labels, and I think some of these labels are from somewhere else and I can't remember. I'll see if I can find the Etsy download and pop the link below. I tend, all my kind of digital labels tend to all end up cut up in the same pot. So just doing a little bit of collage here, and same for the second page, just making another journaling card to go in that pocket. And my little bit of collage for the front of that. we've got this blank area here, and I'm not very good at leaving white space or tea dye space. So I want to fill that with another fussy cut bird and another little element, just so that each page has got one of these beautiful little birds on it. And to make it easier to open these flaps and make it more obvious that there is a flap there, I have cut a little tab to go on there. I think this was from the Tim Holtz chapter 3 die, but you can just use a piece of paper and trim the corners however you want. And I've just stamped on there with a field notes stamp with embossing ink and put a bit of gold embossing powder on it. So and added the same kind of tabs to each of those journal cards, so it's easier to pull them in and out of those pocket pages. And I just want to cover up that kind of flap there from where we attached that part of the page. So again, another torn out page from the original book, just inking that, getting the right size for it, tearing that down with my steel rule, just checking I've got the right width. And now that's the right size, I can carry on edging it with the inks before gluing that down in place. And ta-da, we can no longer see that flap. So that's the inside of the book done. But I thought the cover was crying out for some more details as well. So as you can see, I've got some fussy cut images over there, and I've got this little label holder here, one of those little metal ones. I bought a packet because I needed one for a project, and of course I had to buy a packet of like 30. So, but I didn't think this would stick very well to the front cover. So instead, I've just popped it onto a piece of black card and drawn around it. And I'm fussy cutting around that, and I'm going to stick it to that piece of card, because that means then I can put brads through the little holes and stick the whole thing down to the front cover. And those brads do make a difference. If you've got empty holes, it's nice to have something filling them. So I'm just using my pokey tool to poke through those holes through the card. And then just adding a couple of brads through those holes. And yes, the legs are too long on those edges, so I'm just going to snip them off and push down with my steel rule, because it just helps those brads to properly flatten out, so it will stick to the page much easier. So I'm just lining up my fussy cut elements just to make sure that they're central. I think that's kind of quite important on a front page. So just sliding that label behind, and now that is central. Everything else can kind of be where it needs to be. I kind of like the idea of this parrot coming in and grasping something. So I just think these elements just kind of came together really nicely. So I'm just getting that angle that I want the bird at, so that he's grasping hold of that. I think that came from maybe a Vagabond Stamperia paper pack, that one. Looks a bit Vagabondy. So just sticking that again, and the colour, there's that pale blue that comes in on that, which matches the parakeet, I think probably. And now just going to add this label holder at the bottom. Gives me much more surface area with that card there to be able to properly adhere that to the front cover, especially seeing as things on the front cover tend to get a little bit knocked around, don't they? And just a nice last little bit of detailing on the front here. This is a Sizzix Luster Wax, the gold one. So just adding that detail around the edge of the page. And a little bit of collage for the back page as well. So just playing around with this guy here and how I wanted him to be. Seemed like he was floating on the page, so I wanted to add something under his foot to ground him. And also I wanted to put him at quite a different angle to how I'd cut him out from the book. I think in the book he was kind of, both feet were touching the ground, so I kind of quite like to change that angle so that he was kind of had one foot up in the air. And just sticking those elements together so that they're all in the right place before I stick the whole thing down. And again, just adding a little bit of that luster wax to the edge as a final little detail. And here it is, the final little book. I'm really pleased with this. I just wanted to do something that was really small, but also just kind of put a smile on your face as you were doing it. So I added a little label there into that label holder at the bottom, just popped a little eyelet and a bit of extra card. And then this tea-dyed ribbon. Actually, it wasn't tea-dyed, was it? That was Distress Oxide dyed ribbon. And how colourful and bright is this? That's just what puts a smile on my face. Just seeing all those lovely birds and all their bright colours, and seeing them kind of almost interacting with each other across the pages. And as usual with me, I just like lots of little tuck spots and surprising places that you're not expecting, little secret places where you can add writing or images. And there's nothing more satisfying than the clunk when magnets connect together. Some of you asked about the books that I got my fussy cut images for. I'm going to put, there's a photograph at the end. So when you get to the end of the video, you can press pause on the screen and see those books. I get most of my books from charity shops or from like Facebook Marketplace when people are doing house clearances. So usually they cost me maybe like £1 or £2. And so I'm always on a lookout for those. And I know some of you have asked whether I sell my journals, and yes, absolutely I do, but my shop is woefully empty at the moment. Everything got sold out before I went to Colorado. I've been working on a whole load of commissions, but there's exciting news on the way because I am going to be doing a whole shop restock in September, as well as some online workshops. So I will be telling you more about that as we get a little bit nearer the time for that to be launched. But here it is, the final book. I hope you have enjoyed watching this come together and been inspired to create something yourself. If you have, please feel free to share it on Insta, tag me. I love seeing when you have taken inspiration and created your own projects. So thank you for joining me on this little journey, and I shall look forward to seeing you soon.